Tenemos en esta ocasión la parte del doctor Dann, en el marco de lo que es el Seminario Permanente de la Maestría en Gestión Integral del Agua. El doctor Dann Sklarew viene del Mason Center for Social Entrepreneurship. Es el director de este Centro de Emprendimiento Social en la Universidad George Mason y también dirige la Maestría en Emprendimiento Social de la misma universidad. El doctor Sklarew ha participado y trabajado con organizaciones civiles, ambientales, con la Agencia de Protección Ambiental de los Estados Unidos y más tarde trabajó como consultor para el Gobierno Federal de los Estados Unidos y los estados de Alaska y Texas. Muchos de sus trabajos han estado dirigidos a la gestión ambiental y durante 8 años fue asesor técnico principal de Naciones Unidas, en donde desarrolló y gestionó un proyecto para avanzar en la gobernanza internacional de los recursos hídricos compartidos, como el Mar Negro en Europa y el Río San Juan en América Central. Las Naciones Unidas siguen manteniendo y adaptando esa iniciativa llamada Aguas Internacionales, Sede, para ayudar a las instituciones de agua en todo el mundo. Quiero agradecer, en este caso, la colaboración y el apoyo que hemos recibido del Consulado General de Estados Unidos, en particular de la licenciada Ph.D. con su preferencia de cultura y de Laura para poder organizar este evento. Y sin más preámbulo, y ahora que tenemos algunos minutos de retraso, le daría la palabra al doctor Sklarew para hablarnos de gestión internacional de fuentes de agua compartidas. Adelante, doctor.
Muchas gracias. Soy nativo de la cuenca de Tijuana en California, pero no he estudiado en español, entonces necesito presentar mi presentación en inglés, pero voy poco a poco aprender a hablar en español y yo voy a escuchar su palabra, sus preguntas en español. Si no comprendo, la traductora puede ayudarme. Entonces, lo siento por mi Spanglish. Primero, tengo aquí un borrador manual sobre participación pública en la gestión de las aguas internacionales. Es un proyecto del Fondo Mundial del Medio Ambiente, the Global Environment Facility, y I worked on this project and to create this manual when I was working for the United Nations. So I will pass it around, and it may be useful to some of you. If it is, we can arrange to make a copy for you. It's a few years old, but perhaps of interest to some of you. And please, that's my only copy, so please make sure to get back to me. Thank you. What I would like to talk to today on our presentation is about sustainable development in the global water sector from the time about, which is in Rio in 1992, until a time in the future, in fact, probably be considered the third Earth Summit, which will happen around 20. Working hard. But when we think about the water issue in the United States, neighbors beyond our management organization boundary area worked for which involved Pennsylvania. Then has even rule experience on a scale. In that, we'll switch over here to my presentation. Okay, so my focus here is on sustainable development for be talking about ecological issues in general and sustainability issues in general, but to jump very quickly now to show you a sense of what's happening here at a global scale, which is that we are facing a number of very challenging ecological issues. The circle here represents about 8 different kinds of global environmental problems we're facing, from climate change up at the top, freshwater use, which I've circled here, and other issues here. And the degree to which it is approaching a global crisis is how far out those colors go. So green, not a global crisis yet. Yellow, becoming a global crisis. And red, in the case of biodiversity, phosphorus and nitrogen, we're already at a global crisis level. And when it comes to phosphorus and nitrogen as fertilizers of our oceans and rivers, it is very, certainly, very much nicer. Nitrogen and phosphorus are impacting our global waters, as you know, in terms of creating over-fertilization, which affects the ecology of our rivers, lakes, streams, and oceans. So I will be focusing on that indirectly and freshwater use directly. More particularly, I'm concerned about the insecurity associated with water, both for people and for fish. This is just an example. The 3 dots that you see on the globe here are the amount of water overall on the planet if it were represented by 1 ball over North America. The second ball is the amount of fresh water, and the third very tiny ball there is the amount of water that is actually in the lakes and rivers that we use. This is the amount of water that is in all of humanity. If it was just 1 ball, it would fit here inside of Monterrey. So why are we fighting if we have used so little water compared to the size of these big balls that we saw before? In fact, it turns out that 1 in 9 people on the earth do not have access to clean water. 1 in 6 cannot access it physically. 1 in 5 cannot access it economically. They cannot afford the water that might be available in their communities. And 1 in 3 people do not have access to adequate sanitation on the planet. That amounts to over 700 million people today who do not have easy access to clean water in their neighborhood or the vicinity of their homes or workplaces. The amount of water that's available per capita has been going down. Everywhere where you're seeing an orange color, this is above 60% of the current water per capita resource available when compared to 1980, only 30 years ago. So Mexico, parts of South America, all of Africa, the Middle East, and Mongolia and Southeast Asia are all places that are facing per capita challenges in the future as population grows and the water availability decreases. I'm not going to spend too much time on this except to say that there are a number of efforts we've been making to address these problems. Focusing on the sustainability of the environment as part of the Rio +10 goals in 2002, we set about going to try to basically achieve lots of sustainable development goals at once. Our hypothesis as researchers being at a global scale is that we can solve all of the problems you see in front of you: poverty, education, women's quality of life, health, environmental sustainability, etc., all within 15 years of the new year, of the new century. And you know what? We succeeded in some things and we failed in others. And I'm happy to say with respect to water, we actually succeeded in the goal that we had for the first 15 years of this century, which is to reduce in half the number of people who did not have access to clean water. So we went from over 1 billion people to now 700 million people that don't have access to clean water. So that is still a huge, huge number, 1 in 9 people alive today. But on the other hand, we greatly reduced it by hundreds of millions of people over the course of 15 years, which gives me a lot of optimism for us addressing it this century. I'm not sure if we'll be able to address it by 2030, but we can certainly continue to make progress. Meanwhile, we've had problems like with respect to greenhouse gases. It's at an all-time high now. So that sort of environmental problem we are not addressing effectively. Here's an example of what happens when you compare on the x-axis to emissions per capita, and on the y-axis, the percentage of a population that is receiving clean water from 0% to 100% by country. In 1990, the black circles, you'll see basically that we basically had 2 kinds of nations on the planet. Those that were not getting enough very little CO2 per capita. 50% of the population was receiving clean water. And the other group right here, who were an order of magnitude, or even 3 orders of magnitude higher greenhouse gas emission. So this is strategic. And high get close. It turns out we have the change, percentage change, 10% the period of 2000. And Rome stands out as the only country during that first 10-year period that both significantly increased access, about 8% of its population got access to water, and decreased its CO2 use per capita for 5%. So one country out of 200 was able to realize substantially over those 10 years. We can see that there are very, very few countries, Lithuania and Russia, that have managed to achieve both an increase in their water access and a decrease in 3 different kinds of measures of CO2 or greenhouse gas usage. Total amount, the amount per capita, and the amount per dollar GDP. The United States managed to go in the right direction for everything but the total CO2, which increased by 12%, and Mexico, 48% increase in CO2 over the 20-year period since the Earth Summit. This is sad. I don't know a better way to put it. It's sad. Now, it doesn't mean your absolute number is as high as my country, so my country is a big problem as well. But the industrialization and the increase of population and the increase of affluence here in the country, arguably the arrival of the, or the increase in size of the, now I'm suddenly blanking on the name, I'm sorry, of your industry that we've exported from the maquiladoras, excuse me. The maquiladoras here, that has created an export of CO2 from the United States to be created here in Mexico. So I recognize, in addition to the other environmental impacts of maquiladoras, the positive economic impacts, the negative environmental impacts, CO2 increase may be partially affected by that. But overall, you've done incredible things with respect to the access to fresh water for your population. An increase of 12% in 20 years is really, really something to be proud of. This greenhouse gas emissions is something to be proud of. My country as well, 12% increase is really nothing to be proud of in my country. Now, in terms of our overall use of water, you may be familiar with the numbers for Mexico, but I'll try to put it in the context of other places. The amount of water that's used per capita in my country, each year we use the equivalent of 1.5 million liters, so 5 million bottles of this. I've used 5 million bottles of water this year, or will use this year, for all agriculture, domestic use, and industry that my country produces. In Mexico, hey, you're half that amount, but when we multiply that through by bottles, that's still 1.4 million bottles for each of you. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are about 20 people here, okay? Not so happy. So I would like to say that Mexico is better off than the United States, but we're still both countries that are part of the problem. We're not yet part of the solution with respect to water use. And in the United States, it's all about our industry. Most of it is coming from industry, used to a lesser extent agriculture. In Mexico, it's 3/4 is about your water usage in agriculture. To me, that's a good news because there's a lot of opportunities to improve water use efficiency. in agriculture. We know how to do it. You can put things in greenhouses, you can water things at the right time of day, you can pick crops that are more water efficient. There are lots of solutions that you've probably talked about here in this building that can be applied along places like the Rio Grande Valley to try to improve the water use efficiency of your agriculture. And if you do that, you may be down there near where Japan is in a couple of years, or even at the level of the world average in a few years. And even if Brazil's level is far away, you have an opportunity to become a leader by really reducing the water usage here in agriculture. And that is also, when we think about places like the Rio Grande, that's also an opportunity for both countries to cooperate. How can we use water more efficiently, reclaim and reuse it in our processes throughout the valley, and cooperate in sharing the benefits of water management across our shared border. Overall, it's the same issue globally. We need to focus on agriculture first, industry second, particularly with respect to electricity. As we move towards greater solar and wind power, we will be using proportionally less water for thermal energy generation. And then finally with houses and buildings. So all of these things are important, but water is still being mostly used by agriculture worldwide. These are some examples of the kinds of trends here. Green is agriculture. Blue is industry and essentially what we see is that it could get a lot worse for each of the three industries as we move towards 7 billion, from 7 billion people to 1 billion people on Earth by the middle of the century, or it could get a little bit better in each one. No one is predicting our problem is solved by 2030, but we could continue agriculture also. Now, I'd like to switch the tone of my presentation for the year and talk about how can we forecast where things are going. I'm going to talk on a global scale, but I hope you will all keep in your mind, what is it like here in Mexico? What is it like in Mexico and our neighbors with respect to the future every single one of these, but I'll call out a few highlights. Category áreas de tecnología. This is a for a lot
tuve el placer de trabajar con mis colegas de escuela para aplicar el agua. Una de las tendencias más importantes es la
the problem people are not they're in Africa, in China. In China will probably be trying to get Russia's water, or just like but largely speaking, we have a global problem that people are not where fresh water is. Fresh water is not climate change. You all are researchers here probably these issues are but clearly the effects of global warming are very profound. The increasing affluence is also a sociocultural impact. Cleaner water, we use more water, and we waste more water as we see affluence increasing across our cultures. The split between rich and poor that has been going on more and more in my country and other countries. Okay. Sorry?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. The split between rich and poor may end up to the point where the rich can afford clean water and the poor cannot afford clean water. When I heard today that this might cost 100 pesos, but I can go across the border into Brownsville and from a place get 1 liter for 1 peso, I say, wow, we have some real problems here with respect to the disparity in cost to different people for the same, essentially the same element, right? It's water here, whether it's on this side of the border or the other side of the border. And then finally, there's a socio-cultural challenge of having 2 billion more people on the planet in the next several decades. By 2050, we'll have the same amount of water, the same amount of land, the same amount of planet, but about 30% more people on the planet if things go as currently planned. And a lot of them will be here in Mexico. Not 2 billion, thank goodness, but you know, it will have quite an impact on the sharing of waters here in the country and across our continent. Now, with respect to the trends that are going on here, we have socio-political investment that I showed you from the Millennium Development Goals and from the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 that indicate the world recognizes we have a water problem. At the same time, we have refugees showing up with respect to water changes. So here, this is Lake Chad in West Africa, what it looked like in 1972 and what it looked like in 2007. The blue is lake. There's some wetlands here in green, but basically we have a lake that's dying. And when a lake dies and there are millions of people who live around the lake, they either move or they die. We don't have a choice. This is the water that they use. There's no groundwater that's available, and this is a lake that is being used up. A similar thing has also happened with the Aral Sea in Central Asia. They diverted the water away in order to support the cotton industry in Russia and elsewhere, and the entire lake has been reduced to about 5% of its original size. A global lake reduced to 5% of its original size. Some of the other issues we're dealing with is ancient water that may be lost as we use it, whether it's in glaciers or in aquifers, and that I can't read my Spanish there on the second dot not, so I'll let you read it in Spanish and we'll move to the third one. And we don't have enough reuse of water and reclamation of water. So in my part of the United States, in the Fairfax County, which is the county next to mine, the drinking water treatment plant is downstream from the sewage treatment plant. There's a stream in between the two, and then we clean the water. It comes to you. You return it to the pipes. It gets cleaned away again. We put it in the stream, and it comes downstream. Now, that sounds kind of disgusting, right? I'm downstream from myself. But wouldn't you rather be downstream from yourself than someone you don't know, right? So, in essence, anywhere you're on a river, if you're downstream from another population, you're being affected by the pollution. If you're downstream from yourself, you're much more inclined to make sure that that water is clean at every step along the way. What's more, even though this is not an area that is suffering from water scarcity, we have a higher water use efficiency than someplace like Monterrey if the water here is going through you once and then being passed out either downstream or evaporating into the sky. So there are great benefits to thinking through how can we make it safe and efficient to reuse water. In the case of this county, all water that someone's drinking has gone through a person at least one time. So it's very profound that this water is being used on average 2 times before it leaves the ecosystem. Now, there are a lot of what we call in English weak signals. This is things indicating that things might get worse or better if we pay attention to the quiet sounds side of things. For example, we know that the pipes underneath a lot of the cities in North America are old. They're anywhere from 200 years old. Under Boston, they're still using some of the same were put in before the United States became a country. And they're falling apart. We don't even know where some of them are because they've been buried for so long. Big challenge of accidents, whether it's nuclear accidents like Chernobyl or Fukushima Daiichi, where that contamination can last for years or even generations. Crazy way. Signals we the Spanish side. The first I think I'm going to skip that. Is area of water amounts of water downstream unique to happening there. A signal United States wants to take more in a sure. And that's happening in California right now. In the urban area, and it's not a problem. They're being among country can get along, but during the river we didn't have a treaty, right? We'll just ignore a treaty somehow on the part of any partners can make it very difficult. Some of the science technology, I'm just going to point out, one of these here is in Israel right now. They decided in order to get along better with their neighbors and to ensure they're moving towards 100% of the drinking water coming from desalination. We would give them water. Let's pull that water directly out of the Mediterranean Sea. And that's a tremendous change in the geopolitics of that region. And it's certainly things are equally applicable to our cities that are around the Gulf of Mexico and on the Pacific side of both of our countries. Now, behind all these are some big drivers. We have, one of the drivers is that we've been affecting the contamination, the pollution of water. Once we've polluted water, it's much more difficult to get it unpolluted. We have the challenge of what we call virtual water, which is the water that's embedded in a product. So for example, if it takes 3 liters of water to produce 1 liter of cola or of soda, then there are 3 liters of virtual water, or 2 extra liters of virtual water in that soda. Similarly, it might take a liter of water to produce this little piece of electronics. So this would be 1 liter of water that we've thrown away every time we make one of these. That's another big issue behind this. Let's see, what else do I want to pull out of my list here? We've gotten to the point where we think that bottled water is a good substitute for having clean water coming out of our faucets, right? And this is a challenge. So you're paying 100 pesos for this instead of what you would pay from there, maybe 1 peso or a half peso for the same amount. And this is normal, right? How many people would rather, would buy bottled water than drink it from the faucet right here? Okay, I'm one. I'm afraid of the water. Okay, yeah. So, and as long as we're in that mode, it's kind of annoying. On the flip side, if we're cleaning water well enough to drink it from the faucet, why are we watering our plants with that water, right? That's crazy, right? You only need water clean enough for the plants to water them. You don't need to spend the extra money to make it drinkable before you water the plant. So we have some challenges there in terms of the drivers. On the, on the geopolitical side, in places like Mexico and the United States, our standards for water quality are improving over time. This is good. We are working towards national level integrated water resource management plans, which means we're working across sectors to address our water issues, developing strategic plans, addressing the hegemonies that I mentioned before, and of course dealing with climate change. Some of the interesting ways to address our water challenges include desalination, I mentioned before, the collection of rainwater, as you're familiar with, and addressing the permeable surfaces. Instead of having water flow down the streets down here, we can put holes in our streets so that the water goes back into our water table, for example. And finally, there's lots of opportunities for us to increase our efficiency of water. With all of these things together, we have stress going on. And basically through the entire center of the planet, the Western United States and Mexico, North Africa, Spain and the Middle East, Central Asia, South Africa, India, and parts of Australia and South America, we have a level that is literally stressful for our citizens and a challenge for us to address. The United Nations has been answering this call through one of its Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, which is to create sustainable development of water and sanitation for all. My vision on this is my own personal feelings, is that we need to be able to meet the global human right to water. We need to increase water use efficiency. We need to sustain the the aquatic ecosystems and the benefits we achieve from them, and we need to create integrated water resource management. I'm sorry that those are a little bit in the wrong place, but the key to this will be to decouple some of our assumptions, and this is where, as a researcher talking to you as researchers, I hope we can think together about how to do this. So essentially, right now we think that if you increase population, you increase the demand for water, right? Does that sound reasonable to you? More people, more water being used. What if we decouple that? Can we come up with something, for example, like I talked about in my community, where the water is being cycled up within the community? It's being recycled within the same community. You can add 10 more people, and it's still the same amount of water going through that cycle. It's just cycling maybe faster. So that kind of the population size with the demand. We may be able to come up with other ways. For example, we might say, as we increase the population, we will put into effect rules where people can't plant grass anymore for lawns. Instead, they can only plant trees that are appropriate for. And if we did that, every time we increase 10% of the population, we might reduce the amount of water that we're using in our landscapes. Things like that would decouple population from the demand. We also have, with respect to increasing development, this idea that the more developed we get, the more advanced we get, therefore the more water we use, because water is being used to and fossil, and that heating uses up the water because it goes up into disappear. First of all, we conclude that energy is kept with and more energy, but not have more water being used. Fossil fuels in the first place. We have, and neither of them use water to the same fossil fuels without necessarily. I'd like to the idea of routes. We have to reduce our resilience by climate change. For example, and now so if we have to come down, and then when we have less water, there's reservoirs to bring that water back up into our water system. So that way we can prepare just a little bit more for the effects of floods and droughts when they happen. Now, I don't have all the solutions how to address this particular issue, but we have at least 20 brains in this room. So maybe together we can come up with other ways to decouple the effects of bad water from the risk to our water resources. And I would add, if you can address any of these well, there's money to be made. There's money to be made as a researcher. There's money to be made as a business person in trying to decouple these threats from our water risks. These are just some examples of the sorts of things that need to be put together to take an integrated approach to water management by 2030. We call this IWRM in English, Gestión Integral del Recursos Hídricos, or IWRM. And here I just so briefly in English, I apologize, that this part of the system in IWRM is about the natural pieces, and here's the human pieces of water needs that need to be met for domestic agriculture and industrial sectors. There are lots of different strategies we can take to be able to address these problems at the cuenca level, the watershed level, in terms of supply and demand, capital, institutional structures, and across sectors. And I'm just going to give a couple of examples of that, and then we can move to a discussion. So here's some technological innovations. We can use it before we lose it. You know, in English we have this phrase, use it or lose it, and this is a big issue with respect to water. As soon as it leaves your property, it's no longer yours. As soon as it evaporates off of your pavement, it's no longer yours. So in this case, this is a rain barrel that was made from the barrel that's actually brought pickles from India to the United States. and then they threw them away because it was too expensive to send back. So instead, what we did is I arranged with the schools in my county to paint these barrels, and then we sell the barrels to raise money for their education and for their college. And all across my community, these are showing up, these painted barrels. We've done it for 3 years now. There are over 100 barrels out in my community. And as you drive around, you say, oh, there's one, there's one, there's one. And we're developing a community of water conservation. The children know the stories, and the property owners are telling the stories by having these in their yards. This, by the way, I think you have a white bird that looks like this that I saw in the river here. This is one of the most beautiful birds in the Chesapeake Bay, and this was the rain barrel that my family won the first year that we did this. So I can say I will personally put my money towards buying rain barrels. We can also think about ways to collect water vapor out of the air. There are a number of different ways to approach that. We can also think about creating water as a byproduct of what we call fuel cells. Fuel cells start with hydrogen, you add oxygen from the air, you create electricity, and the only output is water. Here's an example of bad irrigation versus good irrigation, subterranean irrigation, as a way to conserve water. Here's some innovations with respect to products and services. How many of you would like to have, you see it now, you know what this toilet does in the top. Would you like to have a toilet where it could wash on your clothes and then whoosh. Now you should not sit on the toilet until your clothes are ready. It's important. So that's a little bit of a challenge. But this tool I believe this comes from Japan. This one is from Japan. I would love to have this in my house. Down below, this is actually more frequent. We're seeing this in Australia and in Japan and some other countries where the cost of water, the economic scarcity, is becoming such that it makes sense to wash your hands with the water that comes out of here, then it goes into the tank, and that water goes to flush the toilet. I wonder why we haven't been doing that for 100 years. Why did it take us until the 21st century to start using technology like this? The total materials are not that much different than what we're using today. We still have water coming into the tank. It's just coming through my hands first. It seems really brilliant to me. So this stuff is called gray water. It's the water that has not gone into our bodies, but that we use that could be used for other things. And I could even attach, this water could come off and go into my garden, or this water, whatever's left above the tank, could go into my garden because it hasn't gone inside of any person. So there are a lot of opportunities to make use of this. Okay, I think I've kind of said that. So we can also think about public education. I just showed you one rain barrel. Here's the first year worth of rain barrels of all the kids that were involved painting this. And we interviewed those kids on the school television. The story that I can tell you. Rain barrels help protect the life in the streams because the floods and the fish and things like that. And rain barrels help my family to save money. One boy, he was maybe 10 years old, painted one of these rain barrels, and he went back in barrels. And the manager said, come back tomorrow. And we still need decided we're going to buy 6 of these rain barrels this year. So the kids can make a difference. They can become social entrepreneurs if we can help to raise the awareness of the kids and families. Now, how do some is price? How many of you pay a dues at home? Have to pay. I look at for that week. But when I home my and at home, I don't want to pay a discount. If you now we can monitor is think about the first month per cost cost you 50. And people who are getting lastly, I'll give an example of picture. Example. Here's where the upstate New York, and the New York City was looking to water that comes down from there into their water into the city. That's too much money. So what they realized is that they could pay the people up here in the sparsely populated parts of Earth to not pollute. If we give you money to not pollute, we don't have to take the pollution out before it arrives in New York City. And they did it very successfully. My estimates are they probably saved about 3/4 of the money they would have spent on pollution control, on cleaning up the pollution in the water. Huge, huge savings of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars by basically saying, don't pollute up here, and we will pay you not to pollute up here. Same thing could probably apply within this area. I know that we have problems from industry and from the population in this area. If we could figure out how to pay people not to pollute, then you don't have to clean it up as a community. Now again, as long as you personally don't know the cost of water in your water use and water clean, it might not matter to you. But sooner or later, Monterrey is going to get large enough that there will be a social cost to your water use and the water pollution. And whether that's today, yesterday, or tomorrow, it's something we need to be able to address as a society. Okay, financial transformation. I think I already talked a little bit about this. The progressive tariffs is what I mentioned in terms of increasing the money. We can also come up with contracts to help you invest in water efficiency improvements. So for example, if you install little things on your water faucet, it will add more air to the water, so you won't use as much water. If you can't afford those in your whole house, maybe I'll pay for them for you, and you can give me back a little bit of money each time you have your savings, so that we can pay off that improvement. This is using, we can make big changes to your houses. For example, maybe you're using rainwater to take care of all of your yard and your toilets and things like that, instead of using the water from the municipal government. That costs a lot of money. You don't have money. So we use this thing called ahorros de aguas asignados a la propiedad, where the cost of that is then put into a loan that stays with the house. So if you move away, the next person will still be paying for the improvements as part of their mortgage. And finally, we can set up a situation, which the United States is using for pollution right now, called cap and trade, where we use peritos agua or contaminación. Essentially, we say, this is how much water we have. If you want to use more than your share, you need to pay someone else to buy their share. And that way we increase the efficiency across the system. So as we move into the future, we'll have to consider all of these things along with discontinuities and wildcards that might affect our society moving forward. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I'd like to focus on my final recommendations. Sorry, sometimes I look at Spanish and I can't see the English behind it, so bear with me 1 second. So we have money available to help. There's money to be made in helping the United Nations to secure the global sustainable water goal. The approach of using integrated water resource management, is a major approach to doing that by having all sectors work together. The strategies we have pursued do not have to be win-lose. They can be win-win. We just have to think about this consciously and work together across sectors to achieve the win-win. And with that, I will sign off and thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Gracias a Ana por su plática y este panorama de la problemática de la América Internacional. Quisiera saber si tienen algunas preguntas. Tenemos algunos minutos para preguntas. Las pueden hacer en español y se traducirán para
parecería como llegar a la singularidad. ¿Cómo se imagina o hay estructurales que vayan en este cambio, sobre todo por los efectos de cambio climático?
I think that all cities are on the path to sustainable with respect to water because there's no other option. The question is how fast they are getting there. And in some places it's faster than others. There is a city in Australia where the city hall, all of the water that enters it keeps being cycled over and over again. They've incorporated that into the very city hall. That's nowhere in the United States, and I don't think it's anywhere in Mexico. So they're doing very well. Like some places like Phoenix, where the water table beneath the city is going down by 2 meters every year. You can't make lawn. They put rocks out instead of plants. They're capturing things in rain barrels. But there's still too many people living in Phoenix compared to the amount of being communities. This person is using their is visible. No choice. And when that doesn't, people leave the United States, and there have been third in the last that I was. There's no choice. As much the challenge to do so in the migration that will happen. And I think Israel's energy in the world, Israel's approach is not something. A lot of energy approach about pulling, saving water times. These are somehow our species has made it to 8 billion people, 7 billion people on the planet. I think it has to be at a level in which, you know, we don't tell our children about, I used to be able to drink bottles, there was plenty of water, and today, you know, I'm only allowed a cup of water, or this costs, you know, $1,000. I think we'll achieve this at what quality of living and with how much reclamation of water and how much conservation. As long as you're paying, you don't know the cost of the water you're consuming here, and you can't, either I have to tell you collectively how much you're paying, or ideally I say, no, really, this is, you know, 500 pesos from your wallet every month. And that's a cultural change that we're doing in the United States, not all everywhere, but it's what we have to do. And if every user pays for the real cost of water, then we can start being able to address the challenges in many cities. And where that's done, it is having an impact, I think. Good question. ¿Otras preguntas?
Thank you for your interesting talk, Dr. Sklarew. My question is more into the cultural change you're talking about. I'm actually interested in the social aspects of it. And I actually appreciated in, you know, what they're doing, people are doing in Australia, for instance. They have this flood management because they have a different situation. But also, we have a few initiatives in Mexico about you know, rain management in terms of, you know, having the runoff captured, so that, you know, we get streets that actually capture the water from the rain so as to use it somewhere else. But my question is more into if you're into social entrepreneurship, do you have any references of movements that are, you know, triggered by this crisis that we are all humanity realizing that we have less and less water, do we have social movements that actually, are involved in somehow, alerting people and actually creating different, not only spin-offs or anything, but something that is really changing the culture of water as we know it, because in 20 or 30 years, we do need a change.
Part of the water problem crisis we have in places like Monterrey is one that I just saw when I asked the question before. If we don't know the price of water, we can't address that. So that's one cultural change. It's going to be whether it's through giving people rebates on not spending much water, or otherwise bringing to the attention that it affects the amount of money in your pocket. And we will have a cultural change that will happen. And it may not happen for 10 years in Monterrey, it may take 20 years. And as the city spreads out all the way across the valley, the hills, sooner or later, someone's going to say, someone's got to do more for the water that we have. And that will start affecting things. It may affect people who live here. Some people will not be able to afford to live here because of the cost of water. And these things will take hold. The second cultural change, which I think we'll see happening, is about our attitudes towards water that's gone from people before. The reality is, if you live in a coastal city and the river starts up in the mountains, you're drinking somebody else's contribution, right? You are. And this is something that we have to deal with in a mature way. We say it's not just about people upstream. The people who live next door to me are also going to be upstream to me. And I will be upstream from myself. And when we come to an understanding that that's going to be needed for our urban areas, and over 50% of humanity now lives in cities, right? Once we say a city has to keep its water inside the city for as long as it possibly can, as clean as it possibly can, then we're ready to move to some other activities. But I think those first two things, taking account of the cost and being willing to accept the ecological price of the distastefulness of recycling in our system are important. And then the third piece is we don't need to clean water so much if we're using it for non-consumption purposes. So we sometimes in this country, I think we're like splitting our water, in particularly starting in China where they're creating these big cities out of nothing. One stream that goes into our mouths, the other stream that goes to everything else. So if we can water our trees with the other stream, or we can wash our dishes with the other, if we not wash our dishes. But if we can do the other things we need to do with a different water stream, different water pipes, things like that, we will be able to spend a lot less money on very high quality water that is in this bottle, that is in my water that comes out of my tap, which is highly regulated, and as well as water, hopefully you're able to direct your policy. So this is brought up the issue of social entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is that it kicks in when we're trying to solve a problem. Of water. Someone had to come up with some kind of innovation for water. Follows innovation. But it's social innovation when we say buy one day, maybe it'll make it donate. Okay. I my bottle of water. Those sorts of fundamental. It's just ways to do it. You're one. Okay, so sorry.
Sabemos esta situación me llamó la atención sobre Brasil. Ese evento pasó en Brasil, sí, se supone que Brasil es uno de los países que tiene más fuentes de todo el mundo. Y ese llegarse a acompañar las noticias de los países de São Paulo. Llegarse a acompañar y se lo ve.
Sao Paulo or Rio?
Sí.
Oh, I'm not familiar with Sao Paulo's problems. In Rio has been caught with some very dirty water in preparation for the Olympics there. Lo siento. But that's one of the biggest cities. It is absurd to have water problems, just like Tokyo, as the biggest city in the world, has water problems. I do know also that Rio was cited just in the last week or two for potentially getting the Olympic rowers. So the issue that I was showing before with respect to Brazil is it's using very little water per capita relative to a lot of the other major industrialized countries. And that doesn't mean that that people have enough water. It just means that relative to other economies, it's being efficient, per population. It doesn't mean we should live that way either. The unequal distribution of water across countries always also exists within countries. There are people in the United States that are still dealing with water scarcity, particularly right now with our drought. Even though on the East Coast, I've got more water than I need. I can leave my closet on all day and still not run out of water. But on the West Coast right now, we have extremely rigid rules of water ownership that are creating real hardship for real people who cannot afford water at the level they need to keep their families clean and safe and healthy. Which, in my opinion, just given how much water I showed you we're using per capita, it's evil. There's no other way to say it's evil. If they can't drink water well, our country is using 3 million liters of water or bottles of water per year per person. Something is wrong. There's a market failure that we need to address. So I don't know the Brazilian situation enough to speak to it, but I know that there are at least those a few years ago. He was saying, I want to achieve those steps. It's still something they're working on. So thank you. Good questions.
Pues muchas gracias a todos. Solamente por la agenda del doctor Dan tenemos más presentar al secretario de Educación. Buenas tardes. Seminario. Muchas gracias de nuevo.
Gracias. We kept you running all day today. You crossed the I know, quisiera tiempo se acuerdan. Por